Gladio, the secret stay-behind, and Italy's strategy of tension. Rumors had been spreading for weeks in Milan about men in unmarked cars meeting at an airfield after midnight. At first, they were the sort of talk that crowds exchange over espresso, speculation, exaggeration, the sort of whisper that grows teeth. But by the time the city's newspapers ran stories about secret caches of weapons hidden in Italian hills and anonymous former servicemen turning up with questions rather than answers, those whispers hardened into a chill you could feel under your skin. This is the true-life story of Operation Gladio, the shadowy remain-behind networks created during the Cold War in Western Europe, and of a generation of violence in Italy known as the Strategia della Tensione, the strategy of tension. It is a story that moves from the corridors of NATO and the CIA to anonymous safe houses and chaotic crime scenes, and that left a legacy of conspiracy, inquiry, and unanswered questions. The context is crucial. In the aftermath of World War II, Western governments feared Soviet expansion across Europe. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, NATO and Western intelligence services, including the CIA and Britain's MI6, helped set up clandestine stay-behind networks. Their stated purpose was simple and stark. If the Soviets invaded, these groups would organize resistance, gather intelligence, and sabotage occupying forces. They were secret cells, caches of arms, radios, and trained operatives buried under the surface of democracies that believed such preparations were necessary for survival. For decades, the networks sat quietly in official files. But in Italy, a nation polarized between a powerful communist party and a strong post-war Christian democratic majority backed by the West, the existence of these secret units took on a darker dimension. Italy's democratic life was already fragile. Between the late 1960s and the 1980s, a wave of terrorism washed over the country. Bombs exploded in bank lobbies and train stations, demonstrations turned violent, and political murders became a sickening regularity. Two of the most notorious episodes were the Piazza Fontana bombing in Milan on December 12, 1969, which killed 17 people, and the Bologna station massacre on August 2, 1980, which killed 85. Those attacks pried open Italy's wounds and left the public demanding to know who was behind them. Early investigations were chaotic and often misleading. In the aftermath of Piazza Fontana, police initially blamed anarchists, and anarchist Giuseppe Pinelli died falling from a police station window during questioning, an event that shredded public trust in the security services. Over time, evidence and trials pointed toward neo-fascist extremists, and some of those extremists claimed, with chilling bluntness, that they had friends in the state. It was here that the idea of a strategy of tension crystallized, the notion that acts of violence had been used deliberately to frighten the electorate and push public opinion away from the left. If the political center-right could appear as the only bulwark against chaos, elections could be steered. The link between clandestine stay-behind networks and these domestic horrors has always been contested. Some investigators and witnesses alleged collusion, that elements of state security, sometimes in cooperation with foreign intelligence, had supported or turned a blind eye to far-right groups, and that false flag operations had been used to discredit leftist movements. These charges were explosive when voiced publicly. One of the most consequential voices belonged to Vincenzo Vinciglera, a neo-fascist militant who in 1984 told Italian judges that the bombings had sometimes been used to manipulate politics and that operatives had been protected by parts of the state. His testimony electrified public debate and fed parliamentary demands for the truth. The truth, when it finally emerged, was messier than a single conspiracy theory could capture. On October 24, 1990, Italian Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti stunned the nation by publicly acknowledging the existence of a secret stay-behind network in Italy and by using the codename Gladio, the Roman word for sword, to describe it. Andreotti told Parliament that while the network had been intended to defend against Soviet invasion, its secrecy and links to intelligence services raised legitimate questions about accountability. Within weeks, other European governments were forced into disclosures. NATO Secretary General Manfred Warner confirmed that stay-behind organizations had existed across the alliance, and parts of the European press tried to reconcile decades of quiet preparations with the very real violence that had scarred their countries. What followed were inquiries, parliamentary commissions, and an avalanche of partially declassified documents. In Italy, investigators discovered caches of arms, hidden radios, and paperwork tying operatives to military intelligence. Swiss and Belgian parliaments launched their own probes. Some documents showed direct liaison between NATO-linked structures and national intelligence agencies. But proving direct orchestration of domestic terror proved far harder. Many of the most damning allegations that Gladio elements had ordered or directed bombings to influence elections were supported mainly by circumstantial evidence, suspicious patterns, and the sworn assertions of militants and a few disgruntled insiders. Other assertions have been firmly challenged or remain unproven. Alongside Gladio's revelations came the scandal of Propaganda 2, the P2 Masonic Lodge, unearthed in 1981 when police discovered a list of members that read like a who's who of Italian elites: military officers, magistrates, industrialists, journalists, and politicians. Headed by Licio Gelli, P2 had amassed influence and plans for restructuring Italian political life in secret. The exposure and later discovery of secret state documents only deepened public suspicion that a hidden architecture of power had at times bent institutions toward anti-democratic ends. The consequences were both judicial and political. Some neo-fascists were tried and convicted for bombings. Police and intelligence officials were investigated, and European publics demanded reforms and clearer civilian oversight of secret services. NATO and Western governments, embarrassed by revelations of unaccountable secret networks, promised inquiries and revisions. But many of the inquiries hit institutional limits. Files had been shredded, memories had faded, and key witnesses had died. Some operatives were granted silence or immunity under claims of national security. In the end, a pained compromise emerged. Stay-behind networks were acknowledged and then officially dismantled, and Western governments accepted that secrecy unchecked by democratic oversight creates more dangers than it prevents. But the questions that first fueled those Milanese whispers never entirely disappeared. Why had so many of Italy's most vicious terrorist acts been perpetrated by extremists whose paths often ran close to state security? Who knew what, and when did they know it? In the decades that followed, historians pieced together a mosaic of overlapping agencies, private clubs, foreign liaisons, and violent militants. A mosaic that sometimes implied coordination, sometimes negligence, and sometimes merely tragic coincidence. For the victims of families, that nuance offered cold comfort. The Gladio story is not merely an Italian parable. In 1990-1991, revelations prompted other European governments to disclose or at least acknowledge their own stay-behind structures. In Switzerland, the parliamentary inquiry confirmed the existence of clandestine units. In Belgium and the Netherlands, investigations turned up caches and testimony about training and contacts. NATO's public statements acknowledged that such structures had been established, but insisted they had never been used to interfere in internal politics. For many, that explanation rang hollow. For others, it was a necessary diplomatic smoothing of rough truths.
Today, looking back from the 21st century, Gladio sits at the intersection of two often competing stories about the Cold War. One is the tale of Western states acting ruthlessly to blunt the Soviet threat. The other is the story of the fragile line between necessary secrecy and the erosion of democratic accountability. The strategy of tension, once a phrase whispered in newspapers, is now a studied concept in modern history and political science. How fear can be weaponized, how violence can be framed to reshape public opinion, and how the instruments deployed to defend a nation can, in the absence of oversight, become instruments that wound the same nation they purport to protect. If there is an abiding lesson, it is this: democracies that allow secret power to grow without scrutiny risk feeding the very destabilization they seek to prevent. The unmarked cars on Milan's airfield,
the hidden arms caches, the late-night meetings, they are not just the stuff of cinematic conspiracy. They are a human story about decisions made in shadow. For Italy, for Europe, the revelations of Gladio forced a reckoning, a painful public inquiry into what secrecy had cost, and a reminder that a free society is not merely defended by weapons and plans, but by transparent institutions, accountable leaders, and the willingness of citizens to demand the truth. Some questions remain unsettled. Some corridors of power closed and locked their doors long ago. But the victims' names are carved in stone, the dead in Piazza Fontana and Bologna, the unknowns who perished in other attacks, the generations whose trust in institutions was fractured. History may never deliver a tidy verdict. What it does deliver is a warning. When the mechanisms of defense are made invisible, conspiracy ceases to be just a theory and becomes part of the lived memory of a nation. And in Milan, as in many other European cities, those late-night rumors that once sounded like gossip became the first hint of a truth no democracy should take lightly.